Mountaineer Paul joining Locked On Big 12 today to talk all things, not just Big 12, but specifically West Virginia and their standing within the conference. Look, I mean, last year I had West Virginia at 1-11. I had no faith in Neal Brown. It reminds me a lot of how I feel about Cincinnati this year. I just don't have faith in Scott Satterfield. Neal Brown proved last year that West Virginia can win, and not just that they can win, they can do it under his reign. This year, though, Pick Six Previews, one of the more accurate magazines that comes out every year. Brett Ciencia is a Heisman voter, over 100,000 followers. Guy's got a pretty good following. He has West Virginia at 9th in the conference, just ahead of schools like Texas Tech, Colorado, behind the likes of TCU and UCF. It feels like, Paul, we go through this year in and year out where West Virginia does not get respect preseason. Before we even talk about specifically that ranking, let's talk about how the national media views West Virginia. Is it fair or is it unfair?
It's unfair. It really is. And a lot of people, there are people that disagree with this take. I actually had a little back and forth with John Kurtz about this. He thinks that we maybe embellish it a little bit, but to be honest, we are right in the middle of it. I can name so many things, like Kirk Herbstreit on record saying that we would get destroyed by Clemson in the Orange Bowl. Like, you never hear commentators say things like they're going to get destroyed today. Yep. Like, I can go on and on and on, as far as games in the past we've been paying.
Arizona State athletic director, I know it's not media, but him saying, I'm not going to Morgantown.
Yeah, or you want to go Pat Narduzzi in the Pitt Panthers wearing helmets and shoulder pads off the bus, calling West Virginia a zoo. Different things like that. We don't have the best reputation from the early, mid, and late 90s because we did have a rough crowd then. But West Virginians are much more educated than people give them credit to be. Unfortunately, there's a stigma here. I think it's really, when you get down to it, it's what we're dealing with. There's a bit of a stigma. People think that we're hillbillies, that we're not intelligent, and that we are more primitive than most other people because we act off emotions, that kind of thing. On the field, West Virginia, I mean, you really can't mince words with it. Top 15 all-time in wins, winningest team in history without a national championship, whether that's good or bad is neither here nor there. It's extreme success in football and basketball. It's been this 10 years in the Big 12 that's really hurt us, and I kind of harken back to that. We just weren't ready for that move. I think the ACC or even the SEC, we probably could have figured out. But trying to recruit to a Big 12 in West Virginia is tough. And then you add in all the travel. It's been really rough on us, and it's hurt our image. The Flying WV is in my opinion, a really nice brand. A top 25 brand, I would say, in the country, top 30. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't see it that way, and I do believe it's a stigma. And once that snowball gets rolling in that direction, it's really hard to get it back, similar to what Deion's going through right now.
Yeah. And I do want to cover your tracks. Somebody threw a shoe or something out of their car window when they heard you say that West Virginia could have had more success in the SEC. I point to Missouri. Missouri moved there, and a whole lot of people thought, there's no way. I mean, there's not a lot of in-state talent. There's no way they compete. They go to consecutive SEC championships, and West Virginia was in a better spot than Missouri when that move was made. Now, looking at West Virginia this year, fast forwarding to 2024, per Ciencia, he's got West Virginia at 9th. I mentioned that. He puts Garrett Green at 8 in the QB rankings, and it's a very good QB conference. I have him more in the 6 range, but at least that's ballpark, I guess. Running backs, he's got West Virginia at 2nd. However, an offensive line number 1 in the conference. So the offense is set. He is very low on the defensive line, the linebacking core, and the wide receiver group. How do you feel about that assessment?
He's not very educated, to be honest. I'm really shocked. I mean, it's wild because it almost goes against his prediction a little bit to have us number 1 running back room, number 1 offensive line. You win games on the line of scrimmage, and having the best offensive line in any conference is going to give you a chance to win games week in and week out. We returned everybody we had last year on the defensive line outside of one guy that matters. Our linebacking core is extremely talented. It's actually the deepest and most talented group on our defense as of right now. Josiah Trotter, everybody knows his dad was Jeremiah Trotter, the great Philadelphia Eagles player, would have started as a true freshman last year and unfortunately had a season-ending injury. He is going to be set to start at one of those linebacker spots. Trey Lathan was on a first-team All-Big 12 course until he got injured last year. Ben Cutter started as a freshman last year. All three of those guys are back. We've heard over and over and over again that those guys are by far the most talented linebacker room we've had in over a decade. Defensive line-wise, obviously Sean Martin has been here for 4 years. He's a mainstay and an extremely talented guy. They look for him to have a nice year. And then Patuma Mulva, the Penn State transfer, is going to be great in the middle for us. And a lot of people feel like he's a great run stopper. The defense has a lot to prove. Obviously, I'm surprised that the DBs isn't kind of where he pointed to, because we had 6 transfers in that room. It screamed to me that you have a defensive back issue. You get 6 transfers, right? And we've already named 2 starters in that room. So, Garnes, Duquesne transfer, and then the Northwestern transfer, Hollis, is going to start on the other side. They really, really pulled themselves apart and set themselves apart. When West Virginia played Duquesne, he didn't even allow a catch. Garnes didn't. So they love him. He's really shown up. And then obviously Aubrey Burks, who was some people's number 1 safety in America last year. Coming into last year, he didn't play to that, but he's also back. And we feel good about it. We feel like the defense is going to be above average. Our offensively, you mentioned wide receivers. I'll go there really quick. We were really young. We started 3 freshmen there last year. And so in week 1 against Penn State, that's not a good recipe. And Garrett Green really didn't have any proven playmakers. Cole Taylor, the tight end, ended up catching almost 50 balls and 4 touchdowns last year at 6'7". He's going to be great. And then you look at those receivers, they've all grown an extra year. You bring in 2 Power 5 transfers and Justin Robinson at 6'4" out of Mississippi State, and then Jaden Bray out of Oklahoma State, who was their second leading receiver, and he's over 6'2". Those guys have all separated themselves. Hudson Clement obviously had a lot of numbers last year, did really well. But in my opinion, look for Traylon Ray. He will separate himself as the number 1 receiver. And then really quick, a freshman to watch, Day Farmer. Watch out for the name Day Farmer this year.
Well, you've convinced me. Last thing quickly here, Paul, the schedule. Last season, you had those 4 newcomers and got to pick on them a little bit, the Houston game aside. Don't have to talk about that. I lost a lot of money on the Houston game. This year, you get 6 of the Big 12's top 7 teams, as well as only 1 of its bottom 4 squads. How do you balance that talent of a roster with a pretty tough schedule?
Well, I mentioned earlier, we got lucky splitting a lot of the home aways. If you look at the schedule, we split a lot of home and away games. That helps. On the road at Arizona is a really scary game, I think, for anybody. But for us, it's going to be tough. Kansas State, Oklahoma State, all tough games, all coin flip games. I think at the end of the day, Penn State in week 1 is the barometer. And so that's the game you look to see really how good we're going to be, because we returned 93% of our offensive production from last year on a team that led the country in rushing. That's a great start. So I feel good with that in any game, road or home. So the schedule's tough. Pitt is not to be underrated. In Albany, they almost won the FCS National Championship last year. Nobody even talks about them in our schedule. So, the schedule's tough. 11 power conference games is never easy. It's not what you want to do. We're moving away from that, thankfully. But we can't get away from the brutal stretch that we have right after Kansas. From Kansas on, it's buckle your chin strap. And that's why a lot of people have us lower, in my opinion, than we should be, is because they look at that schedule and just use logic. It's going to be hard to get out of that unscathed, especially if you've already got a loss at Penn State or Pitt, which I doubt happens, but it could. It's a rivalry game. Yep. That's going to make it tough. I haven't done my preview on the team yet this year as far as the schedule goes and given a record, but it's going to be tough.
Yep. It's certainly daunting compared to what Utah was given in their brand new team. Coming up, maybe the toughest game on the schedule and the biggest game on the schedule nationally is that Penn State game. Let's talk about it on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Sitting outside of my house, there is a white Nissan Maxima Arkansas plates 2016 model, and it is banged up. The reason it's banged up is I work for a baseball team. We work for a baseball team. Your car sits outside of the stadium, and it gets hit with foul balls. And then I say, Nissan Maxima, come on, man. Your bumper's all messed up. And it says, well, if you go to eBay Motors, then I can get a new bumper, superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more bumpers included. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.